Hello, I am JX Editor. I'm here
Hello,
with
I'm
Chris.
Chris. Oh, there you go. I don't know how we're doing this.
Yeah, well, I guess this is how we're doing this. Chaos.
Chaos is a ladder. But we're not doing Game
Chaos!
of Thrones. We're not doing Game of Thrones yet, but that might be a subtle little Easter egg as to a fan edit that we're going to be reviewing in
Wow.
possibly 2 weeks' time.
Wow.
Yeah, there we go.
Teasing it already.
Yep. You got to
Well,
give them what they want.
before we haven't even said what we're reviewing today.
We haven't even explained the premise of the show yet, so
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good place to start.
that is. Let's do it.
So does this have a name? Please tell me we're not going with Rotten JX.
We don't have a name. We feel so. Why are we even going live right now? We're so unprepared for this, but it's fine.
Fan edit savvy.
Spin-off. Here we go.
This is
We've just done
sure.
the Avenger Initiative explanation at the end credits, and now we're getting this cinematic universe of editors and reviewers going. I like it.
All right then. So so essentially, we're gonna be. I watch a lot of fan edits because I do it academically to get better at it because that's kind of my thing on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been wanting to review them for a while now, and they have a
There are a
review thing.
whole bunch out there. There are so
Oh my
many,
god!
so many. I mean, we connected for the first time with our shared love of fan edits. I saw your stuff. I wanted to, replicate something like that or try and do something similar in my own edit. We got talking about ideas, and then since then, we've chatted face to face, etc. And this was your idea. You pitched this to me where you wanted to do this bi-weekly show where we would review a given fan edit. And I don't even know how we settled on this idea. There was a lot of fan edits that we wanted to do. I reviewed your fan edit of Kenobi, and then from them we discussed ideas. And I guess we'll say what we're reviewing today. We're reviewing Man of Steel Special Edition. Is that what it's called?
It's Man of Steel remastered by Agent 9. I actually got some stuff from the page up here. Well, just a quick summary first. It's Man of Steel edited down to a slightly faster pace, while also has been completely recolored and rescored to resemble the original 1978 Superman film starring Christopher Reeve, and including the original John Williams score.
Yeah, and there's some bits in there as well, which wasn't credited, but there are some elements of inherently John Williams did write the music, but the John Ottman score from Superman Returns, there's some little bits here and there that are exclusive to that movie. But yeah, I mean, on premise, and I actually think that when you pitched this to me, I thought that I hadn't seen this movie. And I've seen some similar edits of Man of Steel because years and years back when I wanted to do my own fan edit, I did have a similar idea of integrating some of that original John Williams music, not to the professional standard that this one is by completely extracting the original audio out of it. But I do think it is a really novel premise of seeing what it would be like just as an experiment, like even if it doesn't work tonally, just to see once you bump that saturation up and you actually get some fucking color in this movie, and you get the original music in there, does it change the feel of the movie or how it goes over with the audience? So it's a pretty cool concept, I think.
Oh my god! I just saw the thumbnail for the stream. It's me doing this.
That's good. That's good. It's like the thinking man pose, right? This is what we're doing. This is good.
Yes. Oh
So
shit! It's at chat in the chat. That sounded weirder than I thought it would.
But I guess we should explain, because you've come up with a criteria of how we're going to be reviewing each one of these fan edits across 5 different parameters, I think it is.
Yes.
So if you want to run through those and roughly how we're going to rank these things.
I got the document open right here. So the first thing we'll be judging them on is judging. Sounds so aggressive. Originality. It's pretty self-explanatory. How much of the edit was actually the editor's idea? Is the edit similar to any other movies or edits that have already been made that the editor may have seen? If the editor is specifically trying to emulate another piece of media, it might be it'll be docked points. And Star Wars movies will almost certainly be docked points.
Because there's like fucking thousands of them. And then we've got invisibility, and the key of if anyone's into editing, that if an editor's done their job correctly, unless it's stylistically designed to be that way, that sounds like something George Lucas would say. He probably did. Usually, if you've done your job as an editor right, no one notices. Like they just watch the movie passively. They don't really call out the edits. Everything runs smoothly. There's no sudden harsh audio jumps or audio dropouts or anything like that. You can just watch the movie straight through, and we'll be critiquing that as well. Some edits may have a very choppy edit, but the story runs smoother, so we will be looking at whether it's necessary for the story or whether it does run smoothly as an invisible edit.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you. These are kind of your words. I'm paraphrasing.
So the document that I'm reading from, I totally just copied and pasted and sent it to you like 10 minutes ago.
Yes, yeah.
The next thing we'd be judging is complexity. Again, pretty self-explanatory. How different is the edit compared to its source material? How much time and effort went into it? Edits meant to just trim the fat are usually going to be kind of dock points here.
Yeah. We've got necessity as well. Was the edit, did it need to be made? Was it something that people were clamoring for, they really wanted to see? And does this particular fan edit have a place in fan edit history? Is it an important one? For example, there's the revered Topher Grace cut of Star Wars, The Editor Strikes Back, which sadly will probably never see the light of day, even though it's one that I really want to see. But does this edit elevate to that kind of standard where it is kind of, with a given movie, you could say that's the best fan edit of that movie? Is it at that degree or not?
Did you hear he also cut down The Hobbit to like 2 hours and
2 hours.
minutes?
Now, we've both continue to edit The Hobbit, and I mean, I've tried to cut it down as much as you can. I can get to about 3 hours, and that feels really breezed over quickly. 4 is a safe bet, but to get it to 2, I don't know how he managed that. Like, he must have cut out immense chunks of that movie and story from the original book to get that. I can't imagine that flowing well. But I mean, I'd be interested to see it. I like doing as many fan edits as I can, but
it might learn something.
Yeah, to not cut the movie down to 2 hours, maybe.
I already learned that when I saw the 2 hour cut.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the last thing we're ranking these on
movie.
Yes, the movie itself. Is it a good edit? Does it work? Would we recommend it? Would we recommend it over the original movie? Is it an improvement? Does
it work in its franchise, or does it have to be on its own? Does it work on its own? Does it work as a series?
Yeah.
Things like that.
So that's the criteria, essentially what we're going for. And as I said, this is Man of Steel Remastered. So are we going straight into the categories, or are we going to give our overall opinions on things that we liked about it, or are we just going to go straight into the bullet points?
Well, basically, what's been cut? Let's start with, because he says he cut it to be slight faster pacing, but he also changed some story elements.
Yeah. Noticeably for me, the things that they've cut out is the opening oil rig sequence. I think some action sequences have been cut out here and there. There's some very small character moments as well and lines here that have just been trimmed up to keep the pace moving. Some of those I might come back to later on, which I think should have been left in the movie, but were sadly left out. Not necessarily the action scenes. And then on top of that is, as we just said, it's been recolored, it's been rescored, and restructured in some elements as well. So that's essentially the movie. Are we going into overall opinions on this, like what I thought of it, or?
Sure. What'd you think?
So, if anyone's seen my channel or heard me talk about this movie before, don't let the Superman shirt for you. I hated Man of Steel. I really, really did. I was immensely looking forward to it. That first trailer came out with the Lord of the Rings music, the Gandalf death music, and I thought, this is going to change my life when this movie comes out. This is going to be the Dark Knight equivalent of Superman, because I hated the character of Superman at the time. I thought he was a really boring character. I loved Batman because he's so psychologically deep, and you can do a dissertation on the character of Batman. Superman, I always thought was the pretty poster boy that saved cats out of trees and was really infinitely boring. This looked like it was actually going to give it some weight and some, stakes in the modern world as a Superman character, and I was really looking forward to it. And then I saw the movie, and it had a great cast. I love Michael Shannon as General Zod, and I will stand by that. I do think he is the strongest thing in the movie, hands down. I don't hate Henry Cavill as Superman. I think that everyone they cast could have done the role well. The problem, you get Zack Snyder to do it, who is not, if he's not completely plagiarizing a comic book, word for word and frame by frame, and he's writing his own stuff. You see a movie like Sucker Punch. This is where you tell me that you like Sucker Punch.
I didn't see Sucker Punch.
Keep it that way. It's terrible. But
okay. Yeah, it doesn't sound like something.
The writing of this movie, there weren't really any scenes that developed character. The structure was all over the place. I didn't feel like I connected to any of the characters. There was no heart or substance to anything. And for the most part, when you get to the last half of the movie, it feels just like wall-to-wall punching and explosions. And some people might enjoy that. To me, I want more from my Superman movie than just punching people.
Hey, what do you think of Bumblebee?
Bumblebee, I love Bumblebee. Well, I loved it the first time. The opening 3 minutes is the movie that I still really just want to see. And every time it then cuts to Earth and we get like another, person in their car, it's just like, can we just get to Cybertron and just see the Transformers that I love, that actually look really cool now in this movie and have like the original voices? It was fine. Okay. It was a step in the right direction, but it's not quite there of what I want a Transformers film to be. The opening 3 minutes was.
Okay.
But yeah.
I liked Man of Steel.
Yeah. It is probably one of the most divisive films I've ever seen in my life, in all honesty. Like, it is split down the middle in terms of fan base. Batman v Superman, you could argue, tends one way or the other. This is like straight down the middle.
I mean, I didn't like Batman v Superman.
Neither did I. We can agree on that.
I mean, I'm not saying Man of Steel was fantastic. It was no Last Jedi.
Sorry, I'm not going to dignify that with a response. You may continue. That's a whole other topic for another time if we're going to get onto original Star Wars. And we have Man of Steel to talk about. So I'm going to keep myself relatively rage-free for this one, I think.
Yeah, keyword, relatively.
Relatively, yeah.
And contrary to your experience with Man of Steel, I saw nothing leading up to it.
Oh, really?
I actually went in thinking it was the sequel to Superman Returns.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I didn't give a shit about Superman.
Shift. Yeah, no, but did you know of like the whole thing of like Christopher Nolan's involvement as producer? Nope. Now I do think his involvement was very slight.
Nothing about this movie until I was going to see it.
Okay.
Probably one of the reasons I liked it. I had no expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And was thus pleasantly surprised. You thought it was going to be amazing. This was the second coming of Jesus.
Pretty much.
And then it turned out it tried to be.
Yes, exactly. Which actually I'm kind of grateful for, that he did reduce as many of the messianic Jesus iconography in this as you can.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah. Agent 9 cut down on the Jesus a bit.
Yeah. I mean, inherently,
the church scene is gone.
Yeah, thank God. Literally. But like, inherently the plot to this movie isn't rocket science. Like, it's just Superman punches General Zod for 2 hours and then it all ends. But this feels like the intention of this was to just spoilers. This feels like it was done with the intention of, we don't need all of that like, if it was good subtext and they were trying to do something with that Jesus imagery and actually tell it in like an intellectual way and have something to say about it, then that's fair enough. But
it's just kind of there.
I don't think Zack Snyder's quite there. I think that he thinks his ideas are very complex, but he never really, it's like, okay, yeah, well, what are you trying to say about that then? Like, it's all very well and good bringing it up, but if you're not going to follow it through, if you're not going to say anything about it, then what's the point? And this editor of this, Agent 9, did you say, he's just done away with that, and he's just made a simple Superman story of Superman versus General Zod, and that's your movie.
But Aquaman was in It was in Man of Steel.
He was pissed off at Superman trashing the Indian Ocean with the world engine.
Oh yeah, they probably would be.
So yeah,
I didn't see Aquaman.
I wish I hadn't have seen Aquaman.
Oh, good. I'll
But
probably love it.
you probably will.
Unless it's Batman v Superman.
As $1 billion of revenue from the box office suggests that many other people did like the movie as well. So what do I know?
Fair enough.
Should we get into originality then of this particular edit now?
One other minor thing: the Codex is,
yes,
and the whole bioengineered Kryptonians thing is no longer a thing.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, no, that was completely done away with. Yeah.
All right.
Another positive, in my opinion, but
yeah, I don't. I hate Zod's plan. I will agree with you in that. It's so. There's another planet right over there.
Yeah, like the moon. Why can't you terraform the moon into Krypton?
I was just going Mars.
Yeah. Yeah, anything. I think he's just. It gets to a point where he's doing it as a slight against Superman. And he sees himself as like superior to the human race, which is fair enough. But if your intention is just to repopulate your people, go to like any planet. You can go to any fucking planet. Like it doesn't matter. Like you're going to terraform it into your atmosphere and your terrain anyway. What's the point? And also just the plan of terraforming a planet. I'm so done with that as a premise now, as a villain's motivation in all these big budget blockbusters. It seems like that's been the plot of every Transformers movie in some way, shape, or form, is to terraform Earth. I know that Dark of the Moon was especially. Yeah, it just seems like every movie is trying to terraform shit. There was a Marvel movie recently, right, that was trying to terraform something, I think.
Was it?
I can't remember. They all blur into one for me. I swear to God, it was terraforming. Was it Guardians of the Galaxy 2?
Oh, I mean, I guess, yeah.
Because it was plants, wasn't it? He was trying to like.
He was trying. Ego was trying to turn the universe into him.
Yeah,
because he's got a big ego,
the size of a planet. I get the symbolism, Marvel. Nice.
That planet's got some huge tracts of land.
Of course, it has. It's Kurt Russell, right? So
yeah, it's a planet.
So originality then of this particular edit. If you want to go first,
we're going to be judging these out of 10, by the way.
Right. Okay.
That was for them. I assumed you
knew that. That was for me. That was for me as well. So for the people at home and for myself, it's out of 10. Okay. Originality. I'm gonna give it like a 6.
Same.
Originality and concept of taking a Superman film and saying, let's make this, especially a modern Superman film that was so tonally removed from that original 1978 movie. I do appreciate the originality of saying, let's try and make this like something else. But then again, because of that, that's where I'm docking points. You are trying to replicate that in terms of structure and tone and music as much as you can. All the music that you pick is equal to its predecessor scene from the 1978 movie. The baby launching from Krypton, you're using the same music. I get it. It's trying
to be the same.
It's trying to be the same, and because of that, there are a lot of scenes where the music does tonally clash for me. I don't know if that's going to be when we get to the movie section itself. I can't really group that into originality. But in terms of
invisibility,
in terms of like edits like this one, though, I mean, you're probably going to be the better guy in this category. You've seen a lot more fan edits than I have. I tend to watch fan edits that are specific to a given film that I might be working on to get ideas and see how other people have done it. And I didn't watch many Man of Steel ones because I didn't like the movie and because I only worked on a fan edit for like a week or so. I think it was in between projects where you want to work on something different and just see if you can do anything with it.
That's more reason to watch a fan edit, by the way, not liking the movie.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I'm always of the opinion, not always, but if the movie itself is terrible and fundamentally flawed throughout, it is very difficult to make anything good. You can make something more watchable, definitely. And I will say that this movie is infinitely more watchable for me than the original Man of Steel. Is this edit similar to any other movies and edits I've seen? I've only ever seen one other Man of Steel edit, and I did actually prefer that one. It combined Man of Steel into Batman v Superman as one big movie, so it's kind of like the rise and fall of Superman.
Man of Tomorrow, right?
That's Man of Tomorrow. That's right.
I
That
was
was
about to suggest you see that.
Yeah, I love that edit, and I think that if you're wanting to cut down Man of Steel, this cut it down, but still kept all of the main parameters of the original movie. If you want to see Man of Steel cut down to size where it's like an hour, go and watch Man of Tomorrow. So if I'm going to compare edits there, I do think that one's better. But in terms
It
of
does the color
originality,
correction too, right?
yeah, I think they do. Yeah, but in terms of originality, why I'm giving it 6? Yes, it is trying to be like another movie, so I'm docking it points. But in terms of its collective group of Superman fan edits, I haven't seen another one that's come this close and has done this well in terms of trying to make it like the 1978 movie. A lot of times with these fan edits, they're just trying to cut it down, but it's still the same movie. This was trying to see if they could improve the tone, by adding original music. Does that change the way that scenes are given? And there's actually one scene in particular that did actually almost move me to tears at the end of this movie. So in that regard, I have to say that it's done well. I think that's more to do with the music because I'm a big fan of John Williams' music, and that really does hit home for me.
Is that the
So
kid in the cape scene?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, no, in terms of originality, I'm going to give it a 6 on this one.
Yeah, same. It's Well, while it is the first and I think the only edit like it, it is trying to be trying to be like something else.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Next,
Invisibility.
yeah,
Yep.
invisibility.
Invisibility again. This is how well you can watch it and not notice any of the edits or any of the changes or anything like that. I'm torn between giving this one a 7 or an 8. And I guess I'm going to talk first and then give my score afterwards to see if where I formulate this thing. In terms of invisibility, the biggest draw for me with this movie is the audio. I think that's definitely the thing that is going the most in this
That's the
movie.
thing.
In that they are stripping out that original Hans Zimmer music and they're replacing it with the John Williams and John Ottman scores almost flawlessly. Actually, when I think about watching the edit, there are a few moments where you can hear very slight little bits, but as an editor who appreciates the work that goes into these things, there's only so much you can do with an original audio mix, and there are going to be moments where that original audio from the original film is going to bleed into some of the sound effects and stuff like that. But it really honestly wasn't that noticeable. If this was the first time you were watching this movie, I don't think it's barely noticeable. I watched it through my Mac speakers. I don't know if it's something you can pick up more if you're watching it with headphones or if it's the same. So when we get to your thoughts on it, maybe you notice bits, that I didn't. I think I'm going to give it an 8 because I will applaud Agent 9's audio editing of this movie. I do think it was phenomenal. However, there are a few moments in the film where the soundtrack just completely drops off a cliff and just really abruptly ends. The main one that I noticed, and I did take notes on this movie, was when I watched it. We get this awesome title sequence like the original 1978 movie, which I love. As soon as there's a really awkward silence after the main theme finishes for like 10 seconds before you get the next track in. That just felt really out of place. That should have either had music continuing over it or anything like that. And, this is, some people might not give a shit about this, but I think that editing the credits is also an important thing. The music editing in the end credits was terrible. When you cut to credits and it's playing the Superman theme and you're loving it, the theme just drops off a cliff as he just abruptly cuts it and merges it into another one. So there are only a few moments like that, and because they were few and far between, I could still bring them up and still pick up on it. So I think I'm going to give it an 8. But if we're looking at in terms of audio editing with removing the soundtrack and replacing this, I thought it was absolutely incredible. Probably one of the best fan edits I've seen in that regard, actually.
So I agree with a lot of the things you said. You actually seem to be more critical of it than I am, well, actually, no, you seem to be less critical of it than I am. However, I have actually given it a higher score.
Okay, that's okay.
I have given it an 8.5. And by the way, we're allowed 8.5s.
Okay, that's cool.
I wasn't cool with giving it a 9, and I felt bad giving it an 8.
Mm-hmm.
With a lot of the cuts being for pacing reasons, they're pretty hard to notice. There are some bits when you can tell that the original audio was filtered out, like when Krypton is being destroyed. Whenever what's her name? What's Superman's mother's name?
Martha. How can you forget that?
Krypton Mother. At
Oh,
Birth Mother. The
oh,
one,
okay.
no, I
Jesus.
was talking about a scene from Krypton.
Okay.
Oh,
Jesus.
not
There you go.
so easy now.
Laura. There we go. Laura.
All right. Oh yeah, Laura. Uh, Laura, whenever she speaks, you can hear the original sound effects, uh, like happening behind her.
Hmm.
Because when filtering out the music, he also probably cut out a bunch of the sound effects
Hmm.
and had to replace those. And so during scenes like where it's just a lot of sound effects happening in the background, uh, you can tell that there's a difference whenever somebody speaks.
Yeah. There were some moments that I think that, say, if you've got a ship flying past the screen, because he has removed the audio, I do think he could have added some extra sound effects there just to boost the impact of certain things. The one that jumps out to me the most in that regard is Superman flying for the first time. I think there's some moments where you want that, like when he goes past the screen, they could have boosted the sound there because you are filtering it out. It feels very weak and it lacks the impact.
I completely agree.
He could have possibly gone in and just boosted that a little bit more,
Like
just to
add
give it a
some
bit more weight.
bass.
Yeah, yeah,
I
exactly.
like the bass.
He's all about that bass.
Uh, Also, there were some video clips that stood out, specifically the ones from Superman Returns.
Yeah.
Like one, the coloring isn't quite the same. Like it's kind of yellow, kind of. It looks like vomit.
That's what Superman Returns looks like. Before we went live, I said it's one of the most ugliest looking films I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
There are some good things and bad things. There are a lot of bad things about Superman Returns as a movie. There are some good things as well, but that whole movie is just like a mess of like deep orange and yellow and brown. It looks like vomit. You're right, absolutely. And those scenes when they come on do stand out like a sore thumb. There were also some other scenes as well, which I don't know what they were taken from. I don't know whether it was Smallville or whatever it happened to be. Mostly establishing shots. We got one on Krypton or a few on Krypton. I know that. I don't know what
I
series they
think
were
he
taken
made
from.
those.
Oh, did he?
He might have made the ones on Krypton. I know he made. Then he provided a new intro for the Arctic. When Lois Lane is going to the Arctic, we see the helicopter going. It is very obviously a different helicopter than the one that lands.
Yeah.
That's fine. Work with what you got. I'm gonna point it out.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I'll also point out some good things.
We're talking about invisibility, right? Like these are things.
Exactly.
These are like continuity things that you notice. Now, if I was editing this movie and I did want an establishing shot, I wouldn't show the helicopter because I'd know that I couldn't get a helicopter that looks like the other one. So I'd probably just like do a landscape of the Arctic with the helicopter sound effect over it or something like that, and then cut to the clip from the movie.
Or just color the helicopter. Like
yeah.
It won't be the same, but it could be more. It's a different color helicopter.
Yeah. And I noticed that. Like, I don't even know if average Joe watched this movie, they probably won't notice it. Maybe. I think the
I
helicopter
didn't notice
one
the first
people probably
time.
would. Yeah.
But like on the second time, like through critical eye, I was like, oh.
You made a good point about the Superman Returns clips, though. In Superman Returns, he still has the red underwear.
Yes, my exact note here.
Yeah.
Say again? Yeah, my exact note was red panties are a tell.
Yeah. So if he could have gone into it maybe and color corrected the pants and just had like the whole blue thing, color corrected the actual footage, I think it would have blended into the movie a lot better. I do appreciate what he was trying to do with those scenes, though.
Show Superman saving people.
Yeah. Which I do think was a necessity. It did feel really arbitrarily thrown in, though, just to see, like, let's see, he's saving people. See, he's not killing people left, right, and center, and he just does that after that clip. But,
also, when like the Christopher Reeve and Superman Returns versus Man of Steel, Superman has like this nonchalantness with his strength.
Yeah.
Whereas in Man of Steel, Henry Cavill is like acting. His face. He's straining.
You could argue he's still trying to come into his own, right? He's still trying to get his powers under control. Possibly,
exactly.
Maybe I don't know.
Sure. I mean, we don't really see much strain on his face when he's doing the thing with the space rocket in Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Invisibility. I need to give. Did I give it a score for invisibility?
Yeah, you said like you
Eight,
said
right?
7 or 8.
Yeah, I gave it 8. I think I'm going to settle on 8. I think there. I feel like I'm being nitpicky with it, but as an editor, you've got to be nitpicky. And, like we're like really perfectionist with stuff, so we notice this stuff, but average
You
Joe
are.
probably isn't. Yeah, you definitely me. Average Joe, I don't think they're going to notice these things, but it's just things that I noticed. So I can't give it a perfect rating as much as I did. I'd love to take this edit and just like the very slight tweaks, just like elongate a little bit of music in some scenes, or just like cut a few other little bits out, and it would be absolutely pitch perfect.
You want
But
access to the original files.
I do. I do, and I potentially might have. But yeah, so you gave your score 8.5, right?
Yeah,
So
8.4. Oh, also, one thing that like just kind of bugged me is the lack of action scenes in the original 78. Or yeah, it was 78, right?
see,
Be-
I don't. I like that. I really
well,
really like
no,
that
no,
because it's
that wasn't a problem with those movies. I'm talking about that's a problem with Man of Steel because with all the action scenes, we hear dun 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 dun, dun maybe 5 times.
I didn't think they used it, and I was guilty of this when I did my edit. I spammed that theme every time Superman was on screen. I actually thought they were more restrained with it. I think they could have definitely used it. Well, I thought they could have used it more. They had the potential to use it more, but I thought he reined it back. The end credits spams that theme. That theme plays like 10 times. I'm like, you do understand the concept of credits. You almost do like a medley of the main themes from your movie, right? Like, definitely open with the Superman theme, end your credits with a Superman theme. In between, you can have the love theme, you could have the Zod theme, you can have any amalgamation of themes you want. So I will agree with that in the end credits. But honestly, the rest of the movie didn't bother me, and maybe that's a fact because I've got on record saying that John Williams' Superman theme is my single favorite piece of music ever written for a character of all time. So I love hearing that theme, and I love seeing that theme played alongside the character. I
More than
actually didn't have
Binary
a problem
Sunset.
with it. Oh, I love Binary Sunset. I
But
love Binary Sunset. I love the Lord of the Rings soundtracks. The Lord of the Rings soundtracks are my favorite soundtracks of all time. But if you're
but you
going with
love Superman more.
but if you're going with my favorite single character piece of music, then it's Superman. Like, you hear that, you immediately go, that's Superman. There isn't a more perfect theme for a superhero character ever.
Oh, for a superhero character.
I mean,
Yes.
you could maybe argue like Danny Elfman's Batman theme, which is probably a very very close second, but nothing really has that power and triumph. It has all the qualities of the Superman character. At least it should have, and you know, not the original version of the Man of Steel version of Superman that we see, or certainly the Batman v Superman or Justice League one. But despite them trying in Justice League by
Yeah, I was
using
about
the
to
original
point that
John
out.
Williams theme,
Like a
um,
little bit, just like during a scene that had no place in that
yeah,
movie.
yeah,
Let's show a scene that proves that the entire Justice League is useless.
yeah, because Superman can just do everything, right? And then there's so many other superheroes in the Justice League that are just kind of like Superman. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know much about Shazam, but as far as my very limited
is
understanding of the character goes, he's basically Superman, but just has the little quirk of that he's a kid but can transform into a superhero. But inherently, when he's that superhero, he is pretty much just like Superman, right?
and of course he doesn't have the laser eyes or the breath, probably.
So he's worse than Superman. Okay, that fills
Oh,
in
of
the
course they're all worse than Superman.
yeah. At
Superman is
least with
better than all of them, I guess.
with Batman, you have the quirk that you could argue Batman does have the more tactical and intelligent side of things and gadgetry side.
And then you watch Batman v Superman.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a whole other thing. I do actually want to bring up. I was going to bring this up at the end, but I don't know if Agent Nine's done a fan edit of
He
Batman
has
v
not.
Superman with a similar thing in mind, where he'd still use the John Williams Superman theme, he'd use the Danny Elfman Batman theme, and maybe try and make that work. I'd be interested
That
to
would
see
be
that.
really cool.
I when I watched this, and whilst I don't think that this movie inherently, because the movie was fundamentally flawed in my opinion, the original Man of Steel, this is an improvement on it, but it's still not a good film, in my opinion. But I would like to see what he could do continuing this
That's
take.
movie.
What, sorry?
That's movie category.
Okay. But yeah, no, as just as an aside, like I'd like to see him do something with like Batman v Superman.
Oh yeah, same with
Wonder Woman you could leave alone because like that's fucking great. But
what soundtrack would you use?
would you use the Linda Carter like TV thing like
No.
Wonder Woman?
No. No.
Okay.
Complexity.
That's a nice segue. Complexity. So how different is the edit compared to its source material, and how much effort went into it? In terms of effort, and the sort of like linking it back to what I just said with the audio, I think there was a tremendous amount of effort. I do think there was like a genuine, power and passion to make this like the original one. And in terms of the audio editing, it was flawless in that regard. Complexity as an edit, though, beyond that, you're shuffling a couple of scenes around, you're stripping a couple of scenes out. Beyond the audio, if you're just looking at the visual, I don't think this was a particularly complex edit to make. Maybe the opening title sequence. I'm not taking that away.
Which, by the way, I checked. It's perfectly synced with.
Is it?
With the original.
See,
but
like
the audio isn't exactly synced, but the effects themselves, if you put them side by side, which I may have a video in if I ever do like a highlight of the review. I might put that here.
That's awesome if he's done that, man. Like if it is perfectly synced. Part of me does wish that he'd have used the Superman Returns main theme of Superman, because that just feels like it has a little bit more power than the slightly
a little more oomph.
The older sound of like the 70s soundtrack. Still a great soundtrack, but it is very tethered to that 70s movie. Maybe if you'd have given it the Superman Returns one, a little bit more modern, maybe more instruments and performers behind it, maybe. That's just a quick aside. Complexity, definitely in terms of the opening titles and the actual idea of trying to craft this together with the audio. Because some movies you could just say, I want to change the music in that one particular scene, or like a very slight little change here. This guy was doing it across an entire 2+ hour movie, and that's an immense task to do that. The complexity of like taking things out the plot, that inherently can be a problem, because if you do take one element out, that's going to have a snowball effect on the rest of the movie. But honestly, with the stuff like the codex out of the movie and things like that, I didn't even notice it. Like, I didn't think it was necessary to the plot, and he proved that with this. But in terms of like the actual what he's doing, regardless of that title sequence, it is just a simple case of cutting that out, moving that to there. I'm going to give the complexity, I'm going to give it like a 7.5, I think. I think that's fair.
Again, you actually exactly the same.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
So I'm just going to put 7.5 here.
Because I saw your face there, and I thought like, oh, was that a bit too harsh? Maybe I could bump it up to an 8, but 7.5, I think it's,
Well, one, don't let my reaction influence yours. If you did that, you'd fucking love The Last Jedi.
That's true. And that ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
Ever.
Well, hey, watch The Coward's Cut.
Yeah.
Available now on fireworksstudios.com.
So, did you pretty much thought exactly the same then?
Yeah, well, despite the color correction being complete, it was pretty simple. Like, you remove a greenish hue, up the saturation. Yeah. And it looks great, but the only thing tremendously complex about the edit is the sound design. You have to recreate all those sound effects that he wasn't able to filter out of the music. And the only thing tremendously complex about it would be if he did create those shots of Krypton and, of course, the opening titles, which are over stock footage from flying through space and a bunch of things. Also, one thing I wanted to mention, at the beginning of Man of Steel, when we see the pod that baby Superman is in on up here next to Saturn, I think it was.
Yeah.
It does like these Battlestar Galactica-esque zooms. And he actually like has the camera zoom really fast into Saturn at the end of the intro, and then cuts to one of those really fast zooms. And I thought that was fucking brilliant.
Yeah. I know a lot of those zooms are in the original movie, but if he's added some like artificial zooms in as well, that's great. If it's influenced that scene, it's improved that scene.
Yeah.
So I guess is that are you
Seven
finished with
7.5. You kind of like nailed it. Like it earns a solid 7.5
Mhm.
for complexity, and I think that that's just kind of a given at this point.
Yeah. Necessity. So was this an edit that absolutely had to be made? Was this something that people were clamoring for? And does this edit have any, particular place in fan edit history, or certainly history of this particular film? Um, I don't think it needed to be made, because I know that obviously it's a fan base that's completely split down the middle, right? Some people love this movie for what it is, for being a more dark and mature take on the character, everything like that. The action, we're seeing more Superman action in a Superman movie than we've ever seen before. And then other people think that it's a pile of dross with no direction, no characters, no substance to it, and it's just a 2 hour punch 'em up. So I think definitely for that latter camp of people, this is a necessary, this is a necessary edit to make. And I think inherently it's just an interesting experiment to have, to say, can we make this like the original movie? What would it look like? Even if it doesn't work, let's just see let's see what would happen if we take that original theme and slap it over modern day Superman. Whether it works or not, that we'll get to movie in a second, but I do think I do think it has a necessity in the fan edit world to be made, because if it hadn't been made, in my opinion, it was only a matter of time before someone tried that, whether it was just like random guy on YouTube or professional fan edit, whoever it happens to be. So I do think it does. In terms of does it have like a historical place? I mean, I don't know any other fan edit like that that's attempted this. There probably are many that have tried to make it like the John Williams one, but I can't see them doing it as good as this one in terms of
Apparently,
the
you
audio.
did.
No, because I deleted that project when I needed more space on my hard drive.
I would judge you if I didn't do very similar things, and many times.
It was just something to tie me up. Like this guy, put so much effort into it in terms of the audio and everything like that, and in terms of its place in history of Man of Steel edits, I do think it stands above the rest. Some have done what I mentioned, Man of Tomorrow, where they keep inherently the same film, cut it down to try and make it better and merge it with another one. But if you're looking for just like a solid, like if you didn't like Man of Steel for all the reasons I mentioned, because it's not the Superman film you wanted or remember, and it doesn't give you that sense of triumph, then maybe give this one a go and see if you like this one as a standalone Superman movie. So I do think it had, it did have a necessity to be made. Even if it is just does this work as an experiment? In terms of a score, I'm probably going to give it a 7 again.
I knew you and I would have different scores on this one.
Yeah.
Because I don't have that connection to the original 78 and beyond. I didn't particularly like. I saw them. I certainly saw them, but they were. I wasn't really making memories at the time. I don't think this was something that the masses were outright demanding, but it was definitely something that I think a large portion of people definitely wanted. The color correction alone was talked about to death on YouTube around the time the film was released.
I remember seeing the trailer for it, I think. Did he do a trailer on YouTube and like a side-by-side comparison?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember seeing that and being blown away by that, but...
Yeah. So, well, and, though, well, it was, I think the music sends a bit of a different message than the movie,
Yeah, oh, definitely. In that, you
it's
have... there's a neck snap followed by da 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 da. It's just like I don't know if that, but I'll talk about that in movie section. But
I bet you liked Man of Tomorrow because it got rid of the neck snap.
I did, and actually I was going to bring that up because I remember seeing both of these fan edits at some point. I don't know if I ever watched this one beginning to end, but I definitely remember the opening title sequence, and I think I remember like skipping through the movie to specific scenes that I wanted to see the new soundtrack put to. But I think this was the first time I actually sat down and watched it beginning to end. Man of Tomorrow, I remembered them all getting drawn back into the Phantom Zone, which was actually, curiously, Christopher Nolan's original suggestion to Zack Snyder. It was Zack Snyder who was adamant that he wanted the next snap. Christopher Nolan, the producer who he went to for like advice with the character, said that Superman doesn't kill, have them all be sent back to the Phantom Zone. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah,
you know
I
what
think I
happens to
got.
Zod, right?
Say what? Sorry.
One in Man of Tomorrow, you don't have Zod. He doesn't go into the Phantom Zone. He just gets slammed through a
Oh, he
building, and
gets
it
slammed
happens
into the
to kill
ground,
him.
doesn't he? Yeah, that's right. I thought
And
they went back into the Phantom Zone.
also, doesn't Superman kill Zod in Superman 2?
So this is it. It depends which cut of Superman 2 you're watching.
I'm pretty sure it actually doesn't. I'm pretty
In
sure I've
no,
watched
no, no,
both.
no, no. In the theatrical version, um, not the Donna cut. In the original theatrical version, he's just sort of blasted into a wall and falls into like a chasm in the Fortress of Solitude, and that's it. That's the
Right.
last you see of him. But there was a scene shot, and I think it was used in the Donna cut.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's just a deleted scene that exists. So I think it was actually integrated into the Donna cut,
I think it
in
is too.
that you see them being arrested outside in the Arctic and escorted into a police car. So they did survive because Superman doesn't kill.
All right.
So it's my answer to your question is it depends on which cut you're watching. But my point
Fair
was
enough.
between the two fan edits was that I was confusing elements of both of them. So when I was watching this one today, Superman Man of Steel Remastered, I was expecting them all to, most of them to get drawn into the Phantom Zone and Zod to not, and the next snap to not be in the movie. So when it did happen, I was a little bit shocked, and then I remembered that I watched two alternate different cuts.
I was surprised to hear music over the neck snap. I thought it would have been a nice little harken back to what was it, Superman 2?
Yeah.
When does Lois Lane die? And he turns over the world.
Lois Lane, that's the first movie.
That's the first one?
Yeah, it's in the earthquake, right? She gets trapped in a
Yeah.
car. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
first movie.
It's completely silent, followed by the scream and then the spinning, and
Mm-hmm.
we get a similar scream in this one. I figure, like, why not just dead silent leading up to that?
Yeah, and I actually really liked there is music that accompanies the screams in the original movie, but it's this very ambient, very quiet, atmospheric sound, just like a tone that plays over the top, which I actually really liked. Now we follow that up with the Superman Returns love theme, written by John Williams, as it swells. It's a really nice theme, and it does, get me in the feels, but I don't know if that gets me in the feels right after an X snap. And I guess that might bring us to movie more than Necessity. Did you give a score for Necessity, by the way?
5.
5. Okay, that's fair enough. Middle of the road. Movie. This is probably
road.
movie. This is probably going to be the biggest section for me because I made 2 sides of notes. So, does the edit work? Be it on its own merits or in the franchise? Does it work as a movie essentially?
Yeah, there's probably a better name for that than movie.
I think
But
this is
I
just,
didn't think of one.
It works.
It just works.
Does it work as a movie? Is it a good movie? Is it a good movie? Would you recommend this movie to show people? Is that what we're going with essentially?
You know what? Take it as you would take it, because this is
Right.
your opinion on the movie.
Okay, so if we're saying movie, it's like, if I went to the cinema and saw this movie, would I like this film? And it's because obviously it's unavoidable. We have to compare it to the original counterpart. Yes and no. Yes, in that I do think it's an improvement. And if I ever get the inclination to watch Man of Steel again, which I really hope I never do, unless we do Man of Tomorrow by proxy, in which case I will technically be watching Man of Steel again. I don't want
and
to
enjoying it.
I don't ever want to watch this movie again, ever. So I still think this is a bad movie, and that's purely down to the original, in my opinion, in terms of the writing, the lack of character development, the lack of scenes that just play out, and the lack of heart, and that it does feel just like an action movie. All those elements are still in this movie because you have to work with what you've got, right? Did I feel more triumphant in this movie when the soundtrack kicked in, the original soundtrack? Yes, I did. Did I actually, as I said, like, I almost teared up in one scene. I really liked this original scene in Man of Steel. I liked a lot of the flashbacks in Man of Steel, but with that added weight of the John Williams music. And I mean, you pinpointed the scene exactly. It's the one where they go to Jonathan Kent's grave at the end of the movie. And he says, like, I wish you could have seen, what I become. And she says, like, oh, he saw it. And then, man, like, we get that scene, and it did get me. And I think that's down to the music. Maybe. I don't know. So there were a lot of scenes like that. The film, to me, does still have fundamental structural problems, and this is down to scenes just purely not being shot. We go from the origin story of him being sent into space and the plane crashing, and then automatically he's a kid at school. And then we're back to Clark, and I don't feel like we get to know him as a character. This is a movie that needed to be structured. Inherently, Man of Steel as a movie needs to be structured, in my opinion, like the original Superman film, in that, we see him as a kid, we see him as that teenager and struggling and going through all these angst and being different. And it's about 40 minutes before he even gets in the suit in that original movie, something like that. It's a very long time. It's about half hour, 40 minutes or something. Whereas
what if somebody did an edit of Superman Return, or not, Man of Steel, replace all the backstory with the show Smallville?
Maybe that could work. I don't know. I have no idea. I've actually never watched Smallville. So.
Me neither.
So yeah, there are still structural problems in terms of the movie, in that they tried to go with a Batman Begins style structure to it. And whilst I think that definitely worked for Batman Begins as that origin story, I don't think that worked with this movie. A lot of times I don't feel like you really understand Superman as a character. When I was editing this movie, I originally took all of the flashback scenes minus the tornado sequence, which I'm so glad is out of this movie, by the way, Jonathan Kent's death. And I mashed them all into sequence at the beginning of the movie. So we had him as a kid speaking to his mom. Then we went to the bus crash. Then we did the fallout of that, where he says, you're destined for great things, Clark. And I had all that play out, and then went to the oil rig scene after that. It's still not great, and I think there's a lot of missing in that movie, but that's not a fault of this edit necessarily. That's the film itself.
Why was that scene Henry Cavill? The tornado scene.
I know, right? Yeah, it is weird. I do like the actor they got. I do like the kid. And another thing, whilst I hate that tornado sequence, I don't always have to see why they have to Uncle Ben Jonathan Kent as well, because as far as I know in the comic books, I don't think there's probably somewhere he died.
Sure.
But I don't think that's inherently part of the character. What I love is the simplicity of the 1978 movie, where what ultimately kills Jonathan Kent is something beyond Superman's control. Superman could have very easily saved Jonathan Kent in Man of Steel. Like, he could have just he runs super fast, no one would have seen him. He could have got him back, and they could have created some kind of conspiracy for it and completely blew it off. In the original Superman movie, what kills Jonathan Kent? It's a heart attack when he's playing with his son. He's he's chasing after his son, they're playing chase, and he dies of a heart attack. It's something completely out of Superman's control. And that to me is a lot more that to me is just a lot more tragic than any bombastic CGI tornado scene that looks cool on camera that Zack Snyder comes up with.
But did you see the tornado, though?
Yes. In the background, you've got Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt just hanging on to a leather belt, just beating twisters together.
No, but he died to save a dog, so it means something.
One edit change that I did, I don't even know I think this could have been a way that you could have cut out even more out of this movie, is that a lot of things are repeated in terms of narrative, what's explained to the audience.
Yeah.
The biggest culprit of that is we get the very, very long origin story of Krypton and what happened with General Zod. And then when he meets his father, Jor-El, we then get exactly the same story told with a very funky sort of pin.
Love what Man of Tomorrow did with that.
Exactly. And that's what I was going to bring up. And that's where another element where I was confusing both the edits, where they just took some of the backstory and put it there, and I'm a big fan of this in terms of movie making in general, where you're seeing this happen, you're visually told it, but you find out with the character. So it serves a narrative function and also serves a function of understanding to the audience at the same time. Get it done together in the same scene. I think you could have shaved some stuff off there, especially the Phantom Zone stuff. And then there's some scenes that were removed, which I kind of were resistant to, that I would have liked.
You said this earlier. What do you want about?
They're very, very slight. They're so slight. The first one, it's just moments of character to me that were still cut out. When Superman first starts to fly, after his speech, when he first gets into the thing. No, see, I didn't like that because the music builds up and then he plummets into the ground and then we get another speech and then he flies again. I didn't like that. I'm all a fan of him flying.
Really?
But they cut out the shots of him like shaky starting flying like whoa, whoa, and then like him laughing and going like, okay, I think I'm getting the hang of this, and like, yeah, this is really cool.
I dug that. That was pretty great.
That's a great character moment. In this edit, as we take it, he's just like, you can accomplish wonders, and he's like, okay, I'm going to try and fly, and then he flies, and that's it. And it plays the music, and that's great. You could have still played that music and had that uncertainty, and because I mean, if you found out you could fly and you were first testing to fly, you would be like that. You would be equally
he's never-ending story.
Yeah, exactly. And
yeah,
this punch. And it's such a small moment. It's like 5 seconds of footage, if that. But I think that 5 seconds of footage goes such a long way with the character. And something that I think is just missing in this movie entirely, something that humanizes the character. And I think those moments are very few and far between, and I do really miss those scenes. Another one, again, you could argue the necessity of this scene, but I thought it was a very well-acted scene between Diane Lane and Henry Cavill when he returns home to Kansas, to the farm. And in this edit, she just says, well, look at you. And they hug. And then we cut to like a military scene. In the actual movie, they walk and talk a little bit. They sit on the porch. And I think she says, when you were a kid, you really struggled, but you're a fighter. You could argue that we've already seen that where he was locked in the closet and he struggled as a kid. So it'd be repeating that. But it was a nice mother and son moment and really helped to flesh out that relationship between the two. And I would have liked to have seen that scene still be in there.
Also, with the school scene pushed to the front, the distance between those scenes is
exactly
even more.
Yeah. Other than that, like they're the only two scenes I can like really pinpoint and remember. I'm kind of glad the whole Jesus stuff was removed from it.
Not all the Jesus. We still get a little.
Yeah. One thing I do really like, though, in that, and they don't really follow this up, but I think whether this was intentional, I don't know, or whether this was a byproduct of removing the score. When he exits the ship, it's like the vacuum of space, and it's completely silent. There's no like sound effects of like the air rushing out of the ship. It's just in silence. And I thought that was actually really effective. Then when he starts flying after Lois Lane, then we get like the sound of the ship burning into the atmosphere. But just that image of him floating out in silence, I thought was really effective. It's been ages since I've seen the original movie, so I don't know if that scene does have sound effects going along it, or if that is actually silent as well.
We probably should have watched that before this.
Mate, you're not subjecting me to this movie twice, man. Like, I will watch this fan edit for you, but I'm not watching. Yeah. Other things that I picked up on. This would have been a choice for me. He broke up the bus crash flashback with the talking to the mom. I would have just combined that into one big sequence. When we're introduced to Jonathan Kent in this version of the edit, they go to the gravestone and we see the gravestone first of Jonathan Kent, and then we get introduced into him, with the whole, what was I supposed to do? Just let them die, maybe. We get that scene. I think if we'd have had that scene before and you'd have merged that with the initial bus crash, that would have set up Jonathan Kent from the beginning. And then when we get to the graveyard, we're like, oh shit, like he must have died at some point. I think that might have had slightly more impact, perhaps. And speaking of which, what was I supposed to do? Just let them die? Maybe. There's probably isn't a line more that I detest in Man of Steel than that. That makes Jonathan Kent a complete asshole, a complete douche. That is
what was he gonna say though? What do you say to that? Like when you're trying to make the point, I wish he hadn't done that, and then he says, "What was I supposed to do? Let them die?" What do you say to that? You can't retract your point.
I would have had Jonathan just go like be lost himself, like understanding where his son's come from. I wouldn't say like maybe you should have let a bus full of children die. Like
so you said he should have said maybe with his eyes.
When I was editing this scene, I just removed that exchange. I just removed that question that his son asked. So when he says like, you saw how they react, I can't remember what the line is before that. It's like, we talked about this. You have to keep this side of yourself a secret. Cut. You saw how Pete's mom reacted. And I think I did that just to ignore that. It's a valid question. but I don't like the answer that is given in the movie. I think it makes Jonathan Kent just seem like an irredeemable asshole. Actually, what else have I?
Sometimes you got to consider letting a school full of kids die. Sometimes you got to consider killing your nephew in his sleep with one of these.
You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs.
Exactly.
The last thing that I've got here is I enjoyed the use of the Superman Returns footage, but it is very flawed, and I don't think it was integrated as well as it could have been. I teared up at the Jonathan Kent scene. The collateral damage is still a big thing with me in this movie, in that, yes, you are adding that scene in of Superman Returns, but there is still so much. The biggest thing for me is probably the Smallville fight. I think you could have really stripped that down.
He did. He absolutely did.
Jesus, that scene goes longer in the actual movie.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck me. It still felt really long. I don't know. The Man of Tomorrow, does he get rid of the? He has it where as soon as Zod's helmet cracks, they come and get him, right?
They grab him and he goes, and he's like, ah, and he's being dragged away.
I'd have done that. I'd have honestly done that.
We don't have the "this man is not our enemy."
You could still have that, couldn't you?
Oh.
Can you just have the army then show up and see Superman or something? I don't know. But
what did he do to earn that?
Yeah, I think you can remove it. It's just that there is so much action at the end of this movie that it just becomes absolutely mind-numbing, and I just willing my life to end when I watch Man of Steel every single time. And it's a boring movie up until that point. The stuff where they get Lois Lane on the ship, why do they take her on board? She's literally just there to then be saved by Superman. That whole middle part of the movie.
Did she save Superman first?
No, he gets out himself.
Well, she puts the codex. Well, what is the codex now? It's the key something or other.
That's done with. I don't even fucking know. It was lazy writing, in my opinion, just to get her on board. But maybe there is a reason, albeit a very small one. And then when we get to the end of the movie, it's Smallville fight, which feels like it goes on for like fucking 15 to 20 minutes, and then
that's not the end of the movie. That's like the end of the first hour.
I know, and then right after that, we get like another half hour or more scene of
hour. Well,
is it an hour? Yeah,
the whole rest of it is about an hour. Yeah,
and it's just to punch them up. And because you have those two action scenes, it's not like you have. If you'd have had that Smallville fight, say earlier in the movie, and then you had like a big chunk of nothing, and then it didn't need to be an hour long, but if you had some kind of like ending altercation, I could probably forgive it more. But it feels like those scenes are so close together when you watch the movie with nothing of substance in between.
I just want to restate, I liked Man of Steel. I'm not saying it was a good movie.
Yeah.
Last Jedi was a good movie.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's cute. That's cute. We'll go with that. But so in my opinion, does the movie work is inherently the question, and my very long-winded answer with these notes that I've had.
Oh, did I get one yet?
No, it isn't. But I can't fault Agent 9 for that. Like, it's not his fault. He didn't make this movie. Like, it was fundamentally flawed in the writing and the direction and scenes and everything like that. He didn't really have much to work with, in my opinion. But is it a better movie than it was? Yes. But is it still a terrible movie? Yes. So it's going to be awkward for me. As a movie, I've got to kind of like take my personal bias aside. It depends how we're ranking this, whether it's a movie in itself or is it a good fan edit effort to make a movie. I'm going to give it a 5, and I feel really bad about that because let me do two rankings for this. Take 5 as like my ultimate rating on the movie. That's my opinion on the film.
But if
I'm going with an edit as a film, I'd probably bump it to like a 6 or a 7 or something like that, maybe, or a 6.5.
I think. Well, the thing is, do you think that the music was an improvement, or do you think the changes were improvements?
So that's a good point. I think the color correction was definitely an improvement. Absolutely, unquestionably, I think that the color correction did. Whilst it's still a very dreary and dull film, it didn't feel as dreary because of the color correction. When you're looking at like a completely washed out movie and the film itself is very depressing, that can really wear on you. In terms of the music, it was nice to hear, but I do think there is that tonal clash. I absolutely do. some scenes worked better than others, and I don't know if that's a case of like when I was editing this movie, I tended more towards the Superman Return soundtrack because it had more of that modern sound.
It was newer.
It was newer. So I don't know. It's a double-edged sword. It's nice to hear these themes, but they do inherently, because they do sound like they come from a very uplifting, older 70s kind of movie. This movie, I don't fundamentally think you can make this a cheery movie because it was made with the intention of not being that. So I don't think the music did work, in all honesty. Was it nice to hear the Superman theme? Yes, but that's because I like the movie.
So you're keeping the 5.
I'll keep the 5. Yeah, take that to the bank as my overall recommendation on the movie.
Okay.
It's a great fan edit. Like it's a fantastic fan edit. But in
Invisibility.
In terms of a movie, I still very much dislike this movie.
Yeah, that's why Invisibility and movie are different categories.
Yeah. Now I'm interested to hear your opinion on this because you very much like Man of Steel. Do you think this is?
I very much enjoyed this edit. I enjoyed the edit, despite not having much connection with the original 78 films. 78 films. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I also enjoyed the original Man of Steel. Probably has something to do with that lack of connection to the originals.
So, because you like the original Man of Steel, would you still tend to favor the original version of the movie, or?
Well, actually, as a result, I hold neither above the other. I think both would deserve a 6.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm quite pleased with the removal of the church scene.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned that you don't have a strong attachment. Like, you've seen the 70s movie.
I've seen them. Yeah.
When did you said that you can't really
form memories of them? I was a kid. They were on VHS.
Would you be interested in watching them again to see if now you'd
definitely
gravitate more towards stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, I might skip Quest for Freedom.
For the record, I still haven't seen Superman 3 or Superman 4.
Okay, well, I mean, I remember hating Superman 4.
The completionist in me does kind of want to watch them all, but because I really love Superman 1 and 2, they were filmed back to back, as like a 2-parter essentially, and they're tied very much closely together. I've seen like the Richard Pryor stuff. I love Richard Pryor, but like that the movies just look terrible, and I kind of don't want to subject myself to that. The question is though, if I did watch Superman 3 and 4, because it's still Christopher Reeve and it's still like the John Williams theme, would I still prefer those movies in tone and everything like that with the Superman character to Man of Steel, or would I favor Man of Steel? That's a question. So maybe I should go and watch them. Like Batman, I've seen every movie. I've seen every Batman movie. Superman, I can't say the same. So
I'm doing math in my head. Sorry, 55 and a half plus 11 would be 66.5.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got a total score of 66.5%.
Are we combining them, or are we doing an average?
Okay. Well, I figured combine them because there's 2 of us, and together it makes a percentage.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
I mean.
Because surely an average would balance it out there between mine and yours, right? Otherwise, it's going to tend higher every time.
Well, I mean, if it's an average, then it's just going to be out of 50, and it's just going to be half the original score. At least with adding them together, we have a score out of 100. We can have a percentage. Remember, the show was originally called Rotten JX.
Okay, it's just like if we have one where. Are we giving it out of 10, aren't we? Yeah, that's not too bad. That works. Like I was going to say, if I gave it like a 6 and you gave something a 10, would we meet in the middle and just say it's an 8?
Yeah, pretty much.
Because that's the average, yeah.
Or 8 out of 50, 16 out of 100. It's in the end, it's just it's gonna equal the same amount.
Yeah. So I guess that wraps it up for Man of Steel Remastered. I think we're aiming to do this show once every 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, something along those lines.
And I think our next one is, you probably know the actual official name, but I think it's Game of Thrones related because we're going to tie it into the release of Game of Thrones.
I should have had this. I have all these tabs open on my computer, just ready to talk about all these things. I don't have that on here.
I'll stall for time. So you turn me on to the premise of this fan edit in that, I mean, I've read all the Game of Thrones books, and I love Game of Thrones as a series. Maybe not so more towards the recent few series. Now they've broken away from the books, but you said this edit is taking it down to like the runtime of a feature film, which might be an incredibly bad idea, and it probably will be because you said this movie is about 2 hours long. This fan edit,
2 hours and 38 minutes. Or wait, yeah, 38.
so I think you could have stretched this to like 3 or 4 hours. Definitely, like the last Lord of the Rings movie is 4 hours.
I
But,
know that the sequels are going to be closer to like over 3 hours. I know that because it's going to be a trilogy. I had two fingers up because I was saying two more.
Why
yeah,
don't
from
what? Why don't
I don't know
continue it on?
Yeah, he probably will. I just know he has two more planned.
Okay, so I know that this is trying to keep it more in line with the book, I think, or stripping the narrative.
No.
Yeah. Oh, it's not even
stripping
that. Okay.
It's stripping the narrative. It's called Game of Thrones: A Tale of Kings and Honor. It's by Andreas. It won Fan of the Month. I tried to help it win Fan of the Year. It didn't.
So you've already seen this edit?
I have seen it. I enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed it. It's Game of Thrones season 1 cut to film length and as a Lord of the Rings film in the spirit of the Lord of the Rings.
Nice. Okay.
Like you know how HBO did those little animatic things of his backstory. One of those is used over the with the music to the Galadriel's opening.
So wait, is this edited in the style of this has got the Lord of the Rings soundtrack over it, right?
Yep.
See, I got completely the wrong idea. I thought this edit was done to like strip it back to the narrative of the book.
No.
But now this is a Lord of the Rings / Game of Thrones. That's like taking two of my favorite things and merging them into one. So this can't
I don't know
right?
How do you whatever. I'm almost certain I've explained this, but I don't really get it.
You probably have. You probably have. And I've slept since then, so knowledge just kind of emits out of my mind.
Hey, I tried to do this last week because I forgot it was this week.
You did. That's true. So this makes us even then, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Awesome. So I've got 2.5 hours of Lord of the Rings / Game of Thrones to watch. That sounds pretty good to me.
Hey, I've sent you the link a couple of times. And by the way, speaking of links, this Man of Steel Remastered is hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
So my brother has that connection to the 78 and the subsequent films. I originally started looking for this because I wanted to give it to him, and it took me 2 years to find it. So, that said, I found it, and I have an email address on the About section of my channel. Just make sure you own Man of Steel.
Yes. I own Man of Steel because I love that movie.
Wow. You better delete that file, is all I'm saying.
I genuinely do own it because I have to own every superhero movie and every Superman movie.
Okay.
So I have 3 and 4 on my shelf that I haven't watched.
Wow, so you just have them.
And Batman v Superman, which I infinitely like even more than Man of Steel. But yes.
Do you really?
No.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
Yes, I do. For FBI reasons, yes, I do. But yeah, it's a weird thing with fan edits. Like, we do kind of always have the moniker of, like, own the original movie before you download it.
Yeah, there's little wiggle room when you're doing something like this.
They're more like guidelines than actual rules, but no,
I will say, if at the very least, rent it.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do something like this, rent it and delete it when you're done.
Yeah.
Just the bare minimum. All right. But on that, we're gonna wrap that up.
Okay, cool. We don't have an outro, so
no, we don't. Yeah,
we'll see you next time for Game of Thrones.
Stay in. Pursue your education as you see fit.